Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. So happy to be here with Jimmy Akin for 2 hours. Right? We got Jimmy for 2 hours. 2 hours of Ask Me Anything. And the limit on that is the word anything. So go ahead and ask anything you like. 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. I think if I sound a little hesitant even to give out the numbers, because before we even started the show, about maybe a minute before we started the show, every single line was already full. I think the word got out that Jimmy Akin's here. But don't worry, lines will open up. 888-318-7884. For the four of you who don't know, Jimmy Akin is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers and the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Hello, Jimmy Akin.
Hello, Cy Kellett. How you doing?
I am doing very well. I am very impressed. It must have been on the calendar. People saw it, and they all called before the show even started. So lots of questions to get to. But the most important question for me on my mind is what's dropping tomorrow morning on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World?
Part 2 of unicorns. So last week on the show, we surveyed all the different kinds of accounts about unicorns in history. And this week, we're going to be explaining them. We're going to go back over the different types of unicorns that have been reported. And we're going to tell you what in reality corresponds to them. And it's more than one thing. So some people may have heard of one of them or two of them, but there's actually a bunch of different kinds of unicorns.
A perfect topic for Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, where you examine every kind of mystery from the lens of reason and the lens of faith. I don't know if those are two different lenses, but...
Well, we call them perspectives on the show, the faith perspective and the reason perspective, but yeah.
Again, 888-318-7884 is the number. John in Texas, watching on YouTube, is going to start us off. At least I think he is. John, you there with us?
Yes, I am.
Hello, John. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, Mr. Akin.
Howdy.
What's your view on the origin of life? Do you think it's extremely improbable that it sort of arisen naturalistically, or do you think it's not that unlikely?
Well, okay, I guess the first thing to say is the church does not have a teaching on this matter. It acknowledges that evolution is not inconsistent with the Christian faith. There are ways to harmonize them, but it doesn't have a teaching about that first stage of evolution, which is often called abiogenesis. A means not, bio means life, and genesis means beginning. So abiogenesis is the development of life from non-living matter. And there is a debate about, whether that could happen naturalistically or whether it requires a special intervention of God. And even in the Christian community, there's a debate about that. There are individuals who have argued that abiogenesis is so improbable that it couldn't happen in anywhere in the universe in the length of time that the universe has been around. And some might go even farther than that. So there are folks who would say that it definitely requires a supernatural intervention from God in order to get life started, but not everyone's persuaded of that. There are also a legitimate Christian option would be to say, given the way that God set up the laws of the universe, he set them up so that life could evolve, and he didn't need to do a special intervention to get it kickstarted. That it happened under his providence and got going and got developing here. And personally, I don't have a firm opinion on this. I'm open to both possibilities. One point of evidence that occurs to me is just how quickly life did develop on Earth. The evidence we have from the scientific perspective suggests that the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, and basically life got started within 500 million years or so of that. And so that's pretty darn quick. And that could suggest that life is not as hard to develop as you might think. that if we understood things more fully, it would become apparent that life will get started pretty quickly anywhere in the cosmos that the right conditions are present. And so here on Earth, it's 4.6 billion years old. Life got started within, say 500,000 years of that, so about 4 billion years ago. And that could suggest that life is pretty easy to get started. On the other hand, coming from an intelligent design perspective, one could simply say, no, all that shows us is that God did the intervention early. It still would require a special supernatural intervention of God, and he just did it really early in our planet's history. So I don't have a firm opinion here. I'm open to arguments from both sides.
John, thank you. I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much for getting us started. It's Ask Me Anything. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and I want to get to our next caller from Taiwan, Gustavo in Taiwan, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. I'll be honest with you, we don't get a lot of calls from Taiwan. Yeah. So welcome, Gustavo.
Ni hao,
hello,
Gustavo.
Hello. Hey, ni hao, Jimmy. Hello, Sai.
Hello, Gustavo. Thank you for doing it in my language with me, Gustavo. I appreciate that. Go ahead, Gustavo.
So, I'm a Brazilian guy. I'm married to a Taiwanese girl living in Taiwan. I'm Catholic. She's agnostic, and although she supports my faith, she goes with me to masses and everything. She's still agnostic. So. I was talking to her about why she doesn't believe in God and what are her main issues for that. And I wasn't able to pass the first two questions when just talking to her, so I may need some guidance on that. So the first question that she had was, why should she care if there is a God or not? And her second question is, assuming there is a God, why should she believe on the God that we believe, the God of the Christian faith, right? So those are the two questions that she has.
Okay. So with regard to the first question, that can be approached from a number of different angles. One of them is, well, wouldn't you want to know if there is? Because if there is an infinite loving creator of the universe, then that's kind of something that's kind of important to know, especially because if this infinite loving creator is out there, you'd want to have a relationship with him. It'd be to your benefit to get in good with the boss, with the infinite loving creator of everything, and have a loving relationship with him. To put things a little more on a practical level, we have a bunch of evidence from things like near-death experiences where someone may clinically die and then they continue to have experiences. And there have been thousands and thousands and thousands of these, and they're all over the world, and they have the same basic features everywhere in the world. So this seems to represent an objective phenomenon. And they people report meeting God in the afterlife, and they report, most of them report a pleasant experience in the afterlife, but not all of them do. There are what are known as negative near-death experiences, or distressing near-death experiences that have negative elements in them, and some of them are even reported as being hellish. And so it would appear from the evidence of near-death experiences that we have empirical evidence that reinforces the Christian claim, or that supports the Christian claim that there is a God, and we can have either a positive or a negative relationship with him. And so trying to figure that out and end up on the positive side of things would be a practical reason to care about the existence of God, because this life is short. And as Doctor Who recently put it, your lifespan sucks. And so so the afterlife is going to be vastly longer. If there is an afterlife, and we have evidence for an afterlife through near-death experiences, the afterlife is going to be vastly longer than this life. And if you want a good afterlife, it makes sense to pay attention to that question right now in this life, which leads to your second question of why worship the Christian God rather than some other deity. Well, there's not a single short answer to that. There are a variety of different evidences for the Christian faith, the one that I normally lead with is the resurrection of Christ. Because Jesus came, he claimed to be the Jewish Messiah, he claimed to be the Son of God, and then he was crucified and rose from the dead. And if you can rise from the dead, that goes a long way towards validating your claim to be the Son of God and the Messiah and to have a prominent place in God's plan, and thus that one would want to worship the Christian God. So what one can then do is look at the resurrection of Christ and say, what evidence do we have regarding this? And what else besides the resurrection could explain the reports of Jesus being raised? And there have been a variety of different proposed alternative explanations, like maybe he didn't really rise, maybe people just thought they saw him when they didn't, or maybe he had a twin, or maybe he just swooned on the cross. He kind of passed out, but he didn't really die. And what you can do is you can go through each one of those alternative explanations and show why it doesn't work. Like I just mentioned 3 of them. The first one is maybe they just thought they saw him and it wasn't really him. Well, in that case, his body would still be in the tomb. And so when the early Christians started preaching the resurrection of Jesus, the Jewish authorities could have just gone to the tomb and produced the body. And that would have ended Christianity real quick. You know, if you bring out the body and he's not alive, that's going to end things pretty fast. Could he have had a twin? Well, sure, but twins are only about 3 in every 1,000 human births. And so identical twins, that is. And if he had had an identical twin, people would have known about it. And they wouldn't have assumed that it was Jesus when they saw him again. They would have assumed it was the twin, because they didn't think in terms of, oh, Jesus has just been risen from the dead. If you read the Gospels, their first explanation is someone moved the body. When they discover the empty tomb, they think someone's taken the body. And then when Jesus shows up, their second interpretation is we're seeing a ghost. And Jesus eats food and lets them touch him and stuff to show he's not a ghost. But they would have then have had a third theory of, oh, you're the twin. You know, because twins are notable. People, when someone has a twin, other people know it. And so the twin theory doesn't look like it really works. Also, on the twin theory, his body would still be in the tomb, and the Jewish authorities could just go produce the body. Then I mentioned, what was the third one I mentioned? Not the twin, the swoon theory. Okay, so the swoon theory would account for why the tomb is empty if he then revived and somehow got out of the tomb. But what it wouldn't account for is his ascension into heaven, because just because you have a coma and then you wake up out of the coma, it doesn't let you fly. And so you would still have additional problems on the swoon theory. So if you work your way through all the different alternative explanations to the resurrection, it ends up that the resurrection hypothesis best explains the data we have.
So then if this resurrection is true, then also means that by consequence the Christianity is true, and so the Christian God is the real one.
Yep. And I've got actually with the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics, I have a whole course. It's the Introduction to Apologetics course, where I cover this kind of material. And so otherwise I'd try to send you a book, but being in Taiwan, we unfortunately can't ship books overseas. But you could sign up for the Introduction to Apologetics course, or even my Evidence for Christ course. And that would let you watch video to get a more extensive background in all of this. And your wife could watch it with you.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate also the more practical approach to the answers. She's a very practical person, so that will be helpful when talking to her.
Very good, Gustavo. Well, enjoy your Friday morning.
Yeah, it's Friday morning here, getting ready to go to work.
Oh, well, enjoy your work day. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right, I will.
Okay, we better take a quick break. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's Ask Me Anything. Lines are full. One line will open up, 888-318-7884.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live. Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
Unplanned, the true story of Abby Johnson.
I would be the youngest director in Planned Parenthood history.
She believed in a woman's right to choose.
I've had an abortion myself, so I don't have any problem with another woman making the same decision.
Until the day she saw something that changed everything.
Tiny, perfect little baby. And then it was just gone.
Now she's pulling back the curtain on the abortion industry. Unplanned.
Available at EWTNRC.com and the EWTN app.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Big Catholic Conference is coming up in September here, Big Catholic Answers Conference. Learn from me the parables, sermons, and conversations of Jesus Christ. September 26th through the 29th, right here at the Hyatt Regency La Jolla at Aventine. Great room rates and lots of great speakers. And also, we'll just have some fun together. If you want to come, if you just like more information, go to CatholicAnswersConference.com. Find out all about it. Learn from me the parables, sermons, and conversations of Jesus Christ. This year's National Apologetics Conference, CatholicAnswersConference.com. Sarah in Salem, Oregon, is next, listening on 88.3 FM. Welcome, Sarah. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi. Yes, thank you so much for taking my call. My question is actually from a friend who's a convert. And they wanted to know, I'm going to be reading this question off, but I'm going to also try to paraphrase it. How do you know when something is dogma versus doctrine? We know the difference between dogma versus doctrine. We actually have been watching the Catholic apologetics course.
Awesome.
But they're saying, what stops us from saying something is dogma today, but then in 100 years saying that's just doctrine? And they seem to be under the impression or belief, and I don't know, I'm still learning about my faith myself, maybe they're right, that there have been some things that have changed from dogma to doctrine, and he wants to know, he gave one example from the Council of Florence as the example. I don't know if I need to go read that.
Well, if you want me to answer it, then I need to know what it is.
Okay. It says, or he's quoting here, he says, it firmly believes, professes, and preaches that all those who are outside the Catholic Church, not only pagans, but also Jews or heretics and schismatics, cannot share in eternal life and will go into the everlasting fire which was prepared for the devil and his angels, unless they are joined to the Catholic Church before the end of their lives. That the unity of the ecclesiastical body is of such importance that only for those who abide in it do the Church's sacraments contribute to salvation, and do fasts, almsgiving, and other works of piety and practices of the Christian. I'm sorry, I can't.
That's okay. I got the idea now. I know what you're talking about.
And he said, yet Protestants and Orthodox are still at least in a schism, if not heretics, and the correct Catholic teaching is that they can go to heaven. Does that make sense?
Sure. So let's deal with the first question first, and then I'll loop back on the second question. So now, first thing I'm going to do is explain what the difference is between a doctrine and a dogma. Now, you know that, but not all the listeners do. So a doctrine is any teaching that the Catholic Church has. Anything the Church officially teaches is a doctrine, as opposed to theological opinion. And with doctrine, it can have varying levels of authority. The word doctrine comes from Latin. The Latin equivalent is doctrina, and it just means teaching. So whatever the Catholic Church officially teaches, that's its doctrine. But doctrines have a spectrum of different levels of authority, from very tentative all the way up to infallible. And when a doctrine hits the level of infallibility, it becomes an infallible doctrine. Dogma is one step further. A dogma is something that the Catholic Church has not only infallibly defined, but has infallibly defined it to be divinely revealed, to be part of divine revelation. Now, once something gets up to the level of infallible teaching, whether it's an infallible doctrine or whether it's a dogma, it can never be reversed. And so that's what stops the downgrading of something from dogma to doctrine. Because once it hits infallibility, it never goes lower. And the Holy Spirit, guarantees that whatever the church infallibly defines, whether it's just an infallible teaching or whether it's an infallible dogma, it's guaranteed to be true. And so it can never be downgraded after that. But when we look at particular instances, so that's what dogma and doctrine are. Your first question is, how do we know which is which? Well, the church has to use a certain kind of language that indicates this subject is definitively settled. It can never be revisited. You can ask related questions and supplemental questions and things like that, but this question itself has been definitively settled for all time. And there are certain shorthand ways of expressing that. In papal documents, meaning ones that are issued by the Pope, the classic language is to use the verb define. So if the Pope says, I declare and define this matter, whatever it is, then that makes it infallible. On the other hand, with councils, they tend to use a different term. And the term that's historically been used is anathema. Anathema is a Greek term. It originally had a different meaning, but by the Middle Ages, it had come to refer to a kind of ceremonial excommunication where somebody who was anathematized, the bishop would warn them like 3 times, and if the person didn't repent, then the bishop would do a special ceremony to excommunicate them, and there was a parallel ceremony to reinstate them, because the whole point of an excommunication is to give the person a wake-up call so that they'll repent. And anathema was the highest form of excommunication that existed. Now, sometimes they would apply anathemas to matters that were not doctrinal at all. Like, for example, one of the medieval Lateran councils said, anybody who trades with the Turks for the next 5 years, let him be anathema. Well, that's not a teaching, that's a regulation. And it only had a term of 5 years. So it's clear that doesn't represent an infallible teaching because it's not a teaching. But if an ecumenical council applies an anathema to a matter of doctrine, then, since the anathema is the highest form of excommunication, it's the highest penalty that the church could inflict at the time, that would trigger infallibility on that point. And so, if a council uses the word anathema on a matter of doctrine, that's a good sign of infallibility. Now, in terms of for your third question, the second question, in terms of the non-salvation of people who have left the Catholic Church, that is actually of a debatable status as to whether that's a dogma or not. You'll notice that the Council of Florence did not use the word anathema there, but there are some other documents that have to be looked at as well. However, even if we grant that this is an infallible doctrine or even a dogma, that doesn't mean we can't ask supplemental questions, because it's always been acknowledged that, like catechumens, people who are planning on becoming Catholic, they can be saved. They don't have to be in the church. And so how do we square these things? And one of the things, at the Council of Trent, for example, acknowledged that even catechumens can be justified before they're baptized in the church. So how do we square the fact that some people who are in good conscience, like catechumens, can be saved by God's grace, even though they're not yet members of the church? Well, what the church discerned over time was that many, and this wasn't originally the assumption, but what the church discerned over time is that many non-Catholics, including Protestants and Orthodox who were raised that way, are also in good conscience. And so just like catechumens can be saved by God's grace, even though they're not yet members of the church, Catholics and Orthodox who are such through no fault of their own, they were just raised this way, they also can be in good conscience. And so they're in the same situation as catechumens and can be saved by God's grace, even though they're not currently members of the church.
Sarah, I'm going to leave that there and say thank you very much. I do hope that was helpful to you. Call back again sometime if you need follow-up help.
By the way, I talk about all this in my book, Teaching with Authority, and since Sarah is here in the United States, maybe we can send her a copy of that.
Sarah, all you got to do is hang on the line. Edgar will get your information, and we will send you Jimmy's book, Teaching with Authority. Hey, if you're on the line, hang on the line. We're only going to be away for about a minute and a half. But if you haven't dialed, there's going to be one line open shortly, 888-318-7884. It's Ask Me Anything. Jimmy Akin is our guest. We'll be right back with more right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Why We're Catholic is the one book you can hand to anyone to invite them into or back to the Catholic faith. With more than 400,000 copies sold, Trent Horn's book has had a #1 ranking on Amazon.com for 5 years running. Now available in softcover, bulk cases, ebook, and on Audible. Find out what the excitement is all about. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic at shop.catholic.com or at a good Catholic bookstore. Visit whywe'recatholic.com.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Is orthodoxy an alternative to the Catholic Church? In a time of uncertainty for many Catholics, orthodoxy can look like greener pastures. Answering Orthodoxy, the new book from Catholic Answers Press, explains why Catholics who are thinking of leaving need to think twice. There are important reasons to remain in the Catholic Church and convincing answers to Orthodox claims. Order your copy of Answering Orthodoxy today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers Monthly Giving Club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
A little bit of groovy music there for you. It's a Thursday afternoon, at least where we are. Maybe it's Thursday evening, or as with one of our earlier callers, might even be a Friday morning where you are. But it's always nice to have Jimmy here for these hours, and a little bit of groovy music, very helpful as well. It's Ask Me Anything, and you are welcome to call with your questions. 888-318-7884. We're going to go to Philadelphia now, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Listening on the Catholic Answers Live app is George. George, thank you very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello, Cy. Hello, Jimmy.
Hi, George.
My question is this. Did St. Joseph and the Holy Family have spiritual authority over the Mother of God and the Son of God?
Well, so the basic answer is, I'd ask questions about, so what do you mean exactly by spiritual authority? But the basic answer is going to be yeah. He had the same authority in his family that every father does in their family. We see evidence for his authority with respect to Jesus in Luke chapter 2, where after the finding in the temple, Luke notes that Jesus went back to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. So that means Jesus respected their authority, which is what you'd expect from a perfect Son of God who's going to fulfill the 10 Commandments, like honor your father and mother. So we have a pretty explicit statement regarding Joseph's authority with respect to Jesus. The next question would be, what about with respect to Mary? And Mary perfectly also fulfilled the Jewish law, and that included respecting the authority of the husband. And so in Jewish society, it was a given that the husband was the head of the local family. That didn't mean that the husband was a dictator or made all the decisions or anything like that. And so Joseph, having 2 extraordinary other members of the family, would no doubt have deferred to them on many matters. But in terms of the principle of, did he have the ordinary authority, not just spiritual, but also natural, that a father would have in a family? Yes, he did.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
No problem.
George, thank you very much for the call. The number 888-318-7884. Off to Indiana. Now, Lily is in Indiana listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Hello, Lily. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Thank you. So can you help me explain to my unchurched friend the role of the magisterium in regard to translations of the Bible and why we should heed the magisterium in the first place? Thank you, sir.
Okay, you mean heed the magisterium in respect to Bible translations?
Both in regard to Bible translations and just in general, too.
Okay. Well, let's deal with the second question first. So the magisterium is the bishops of the world teaching in union with the Pope, and they are guided by the Holy Spirit. Jesus promised that he would go back to heaven, and then he'd send the Holy Spirit, and he promised the disciples that the Holy Spirit would lead them into all truth. And so the Holy Spirit guides the leadership of the church. Jesus also promised that he would guide the leadership of the church, because in Matthew's gospel at the very end, he says, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore into all the nations, baptizing them and teaching them whatever I've commanded you. And behold, I am with you until the end of the age, meaning the end of the world. So Jesus and the Holy Spirit are guiding his church. And one of the ways that's expressed is through the leadership of the church, which is the bishops. So that's a basic answer to why we should trust the magisterium. In terms of the magisterium's role with respect to Bible translations, it's actually very minimal. Under canon law, the National Conference of Bishops or the Vatican has the responsibility to approve Bible translations. So if you anybody can translate the Bible, but once you've translated it, you need to run it past either your local National Conference of Catholic Bishops or run it past the Vatican, and they get to say whether or not you get to publish it. And this is a fail-safe because people have made bad translations, and so they want the church leadership to look at the translation to make sure that it's accurate. And so that's really the only role that the magisterium has in making Bible translations. It doesn't make them itself, not typically, but it does have the right to approve Bible translations. Now, there are some that members of the magisterium have participated in, like the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops had commissioned a group of scholars to produce what's known as the New American Bible, and then they approved it here in America. It wasn't actually really translated by bishops. It was translated by a committee of scholars. But the magisterium did commission the scholars to do that, and it did then approve the translation. But basically, this is a pretty minimal role. And you don't have to be commissioned in order by a bishop's conference in order to do a Bible translation. There are lots of Bible translations that were not done under the auspices of the bishops that the bishops have nevertheless approved, like the Revised Standard Version, the English Standard Version, the Good News Bible, all kinds of things like that. And so many of these translations weren't even made by Catholics, but these days translators have gotten really good, regardless of whether they're Protestant or Catholic, and most Bible translations that are professionally published are actually very good. And the church doesn't have a problem with that. So there's not going to be a lot of difference between most professionally published Bible translations, and no translation is perfect. There's always going to be small infelicities in any translation, but by and large, the professionally done ones are good and don't substantially disagree with each other. In fact, there are multiple editions of the Bible that are common to Catholics, Protestants, and Orthodox, where it's been approved by all three groups, and we can use the same Bible together because fundamentally Hebrew is Hebrew, Aramaic is Aramaic, and Greek is Greek, and we can all pretty much agree on what it means.
Did that get to what you were looking for, Lily?
Yeah, sure thing. And I was just wondering, could I possibly get a copy of Why We're Catholic? I couldn't fit it into my budget for this month.
Well, yes, we can give you a copy of Why We're Catholic, but I'm also going to send you
points for boldness.
I know. Good for you, Lily, and good for you for budgeting as well. I've got to learn that skill. But I also want to send you a copy of Jimmy Akin's book, The Bible is a Catholic Book. We'll send you both of them. If you just hang on, Edgar will get your information. What a nice call. Thank you, Lily. I'm going to go to John now in Gainesville, Florida, listening to EWTN on Channel 130. Sirius XM satellite radio. John, awful glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, Jimmy. So, I've had this question for a couple of days. I was wondering how specific I need to be for my confession to be valid.
Okay, well, I'll give you the basic answer, and then we can drill down if needed. But remember, this is a family show. So if we do need to go further, please bear that in mind. The basic answer is that we need to confess our sins by kind and, to the extent possible, by number. So that means naming the kind of sin it was, and if possible, how many times we did it. Now, sometimes people don't remember, and in that case, you can just say, I did this a lot, or I did this a few times, but the number is often hard to remember, especially when it's a sin someone's really struggling with. When it comes to naming the kind of sin, historically, people have often thought in terms of genus and species. And so one common way you'll hear this described is one needs to name any factor that would affect the species of sin. Like, for example, and I'm going to avoid a word that starts with the letter R here. But to give an example, if you violated a woman, you would need to confess that. But if you violated a nun, it adds the element of sacrilege. And so you would need to say, and it was a nun. But so that kind of gives an illustration of what it means, what could affect the species. What we do not need to confess are all the micro little details. Like, let's say someone is struggling with impure thoughts. Well, all you got to say is impure thoughts. You don't got to, go into every little detail of whatever fantasy was involved. Now, what could affect impure thoughts is, well, like, were they heterosexual or were they homosexual? That's something that someone, I would probably encourage the person if to say that. But fundamentally, you don't got to go into a great deal of detail, and you don't got to confess circumstances connected with this, like how responsible you were or weren't, or the details of when it happened, or what led to it, or anything like that. You just got to say, I did this many times, and that's it.
John, I'm going to leave that there because we're right at the break. I hope that that's helpful to you. We will be right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
In Morse code, the sequence SOS is a distress call. It's been said that it stands for Save Our Souls. Well, right now our world is in big trouble, and we're putting out an SOS call for help. Will you answer that call? St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, has hundreds of teams who share the good news with souls who don't know Jesus. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to get involved.
One of the reasons we should go to Mass is because, if you look in the Catechism, you will see the fruits of Holy Communion. And these are remarkable things that we can receive at every Mass that we attend. We encounter the risen Lord, and He shares something of His divine life and love with us.
The Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, live from the EWTN Chapel, every morning, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and Television.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin is our guest today, both hours. So the lines will stay full. That's just how that works. There's nothing I can do about it. That's just how that works. But as you get the desire to call, if you call 888-318-7884, if there's a line open when you dial, you'll come right in here to the studio. Edgar will get you taken care of, and we'll get you on the air with Jimmy, and you can ask him anything. That's what an Ask Me Anything is about. I have not said it yet this hour, so let me assure you that if you are new and maybe you're not a Catholic, maybe you're not a Christian, it's not just Ask Me Anything. It's anyone can ask me anything. So please feel welcome. We'd like you to feel welcome here. 888-318-7884. We're going to Salvatore in Las Vegas, Nevada, listening on Catholic.com. Salvatore, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much. Nice to talk to you today.
Salvatore, we're going to need you. It's really hard to hear you. So is there any way you could speak more directly into the microphone of the phone there?
Give me 1 second. Is this better now?
Not really. I want to be honest with you. Not really. Let's.
Sorry.
All right. I don't know what's going on. Did you say I'm going to the?
Right. Is this better now?
Oh my gosh, that's so much better. Thank you for coming out of the tunnel.
There we go.
I'm glad you're here.
Never use speakerphone when you're calling a radio show.
Sorry about that. So my question to Jimmy Akin is, I have somebody who is Protestant, and they hold on to the idea that Saint Ignatius of Antioch, the letters that are written are very questionable, mostly due to the reasons about his mysterious martyrdom that states that he went to Rome, all of that stuff. So my question would be, what would be good evidence to show that Ignatius of Antioch's letters are reliable?
Well, okay, so so for people who may not be aware, Ignatius of Antioch was a Christian martyr who was martyred around the year AD 108, so right at the beginning of the 2nd century. And there are several versions of his letters. They're called recensions. A recension is basically a fancy word for an addition. There is a short recension that, has the letters, but they're really abbreviated. There's a middle recension, and there's a long recension. And there are also a few additional letters that are not regarded as being by Ignatius, although some people historically did regard them as being by Ignatius. Well, after the Protestant Reformation began, this became a big hullabaloo, because his letters do contain material that's very supportive of the Catholic faith. I'm not sure, based on what you said, exactly what your friend's ground for doubting him is, because just because you're martyred, that doesn't mean you didn't write letters. So I don't really see how those are connected. But this got a lot of scholarly attention. And I'm happy to report that by the 19th century, this had largely been sorted out, and not just by Catholic scholars. There were Protestant scholars like J.B. Lightfoot, who was a famous British scholar, also Theodor Zahn, a famous German scholar, also a Protestant. They looked at the evidence and concluded that, it looks like the middle recension is actually historically accurate, that this was written by Ignatius, and somebody then later produced the longer recension. They added to them, and someone later produced the shorter recension, by abbreviating them. But that middle recension, to quote Goldilocks, was just right, and it fit the historical evidence as being authentic. And so this is not seriously questioned by most scholars today. There's broad agreement of scholars across all religious confessions that the 7 letters that are part of the Middle Recension are genuinely Ignatian in their origin.
Salvatore, thank you. I'm going to leave that there and keep trying to get as many on as I can with Jimmy. I hope that was helpful to you. Flora is in Atlanta, Georgia, watching on YouTube. Welcome, Flora. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, sir. I was wanting to know if it's possible to receive the sacrament of reconciliation if you're an unbaptized person or a Protestant.
Well, okay, so unbaptized, most Protestants are baptized, so we'll treat these under the question under 2 separate categories. If one is not baptized, then one cannot receive the other sacraments. Baptism is sometimes spoken of as the gateway to the sacraments, and therefore you do need to be baptized in order to receive the other sacraments, including confession. In terms of can Protestants receive confession, well, most Protestants are baptized, so it gets them over that hurdle. And they can receive confession in limited circumstances. Basically, those circumstances are they need to ask for it on their own, so no one's forcing them to do this. They need to share the church's faith about the sacrament, so they, believe God can forgive them through it. They and this is the trickier one, there needs to be danger of death or other grave necessity. There needs to be a really compelling reason, and the Code of Canon Law gives danger of death as one example of that, but there can be others, like if a Protestant is finding it really hard to live in an unconfessed state, then the distress that they feel over living in an unconfessed state could be sufficient. It could be grave enough to trigger this condition. There are other situations, like if the Protestant's planning on becoming Catholic, then they would naturally go to confession as part of their conversion process. It wouldn't have to have grave necessity and stuff like that. It would just be preparation for getting confirmed. But that's kind of a basic sketch of what the law would say about those different situations.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
no problem.
Flora.
And if we can help you with further particulars, by all means, please do let us know.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Flora. I appreciate the call very much. I got time to get more on. Let's go to Louisiana. Rebecca is in Louisiana watching on YouTube. Rebecca, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, Stein, Jimmy. Thanks for taking my call. So I was asked by the ladies at my church if I'd like to be an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion. And I just said, let me think about that, because I wasn't sure if it's allowed specifically for women or has its use become an abuse. And we always have enough priests and deacons at our church, and frankly, not enough time to pray after receiving Holy Communion.
Okay, so you asked, can women do this? And the answer is yes, and there is no restriction in the law anymore regarding gender. So women have just as much of an ability to become extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion as men. In terms of has it become an abuse? Well, in some places, yes. And the Holy See issued a document, 20 years ago now, talking about that and saying this needs to be cut back. But it's how many is too many is going to depend on the parish that you're in. And now, you said that your parish has enough priests and deacons to distribute Holy Communion in a reasonable amount of time. And that may be true. I have no knowledge of your parish, so I have to trust you on that. One thing you may think about, though, is do they have enough priests and deacons to show up at every single Mass to do it? Because, it may be that they have enough priests to do it if they all show up for this one Mass. But if they don't all show up for the one Mass, then maybe they don't. And there's not a requirement that you show up for every single Mass if you're a priest or a deacon. So there may be more flexibility here. I would say that, if it's really true, if your parish is just oozing with priests and deacons, well, then they wouldn't need to use extraordinary ministers. But if they're not all there for every single Mass, then there can be a legitimate role for extraordinary ministers. And if you want to be part of that rotation, you certainly can. But this involves a judgment call about each parish. And sometimes people underestimate the need that they have for extraordinary ministers. I was talking to one gentleman once who was very concerned about, and I'm dependent on my memory here, but my memory is he was very, very concerned about, this was not on the radio, he was very, very concerned about his parish is using extraordinary ministers when they shouldn't. And I said, how many people do you have show up for a typical Sunday Mass? And he said, 2,000. And it's like, dude, 2,000 people at one Mass, unless you are just oozing with priests, it's okay to use extraordinary ministers in that situation. So we don't want to, they are extraordinary in the sense that they're not meant to be used without a reason, but we shouldn't exaggerate the reason to titanic proportions.
Rebecca, I hope that is helpful to you. I've got all the lines full, so on we go here. Charlie is in Des Moines, Iowa, listening on Iowa Catholic Radio. Charlie, are you there with us?
Yes.
Hello, Charlie. How old are you?
6.
Well, thank you very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Mr. Akin. Go ahead, Charlie.
Why do we not see the veil removed at Mass very often?
Why do we not see the veil removed very much at Mass? Is that the question?
Yes.
Well, if you mean the tabernacle veil, because it's supposed to be over the tabernacle, and so they don't remove it very often. They may open it so that they can reach inside the tabernacle and either take consecrated hosts out of the tabernacle or put consecrated hosts in the tabernacle, but they don't completely take it off the tabernacle for that.
Okay, Charlie? I'm going to take that as an okay. Charlie's meditating on it. Call back sometime, Charlie. We'd be happy to talk with you again. Let me get to Boston real quick. Jamie's in Boston, Massachusetts, listening on Catholic.com. Congratulations on the championship, Jamie. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you so much. We're all very happy over here. My question is, there are several, okay, let me practice it like this.
I didn't leave you much time, Jamie.
Jamie, if you could skip the preface and just tell me the question, I may be able to get you an answer before the end of the hour.
Love it. Okay. How can someone who's trying to figure out if Christianity is true believe any reports of miracles if the Bible itself, in passages like 2 Thessalonians 2 and all over the place, is like the devil will perform signs?
Very good, Jamie. Thank you.
Compelling.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Well, so this is not a new problem. There are lots of miracle reports in the ancient world, and the early Christians knew that. But what's unique about the evidence for Christianity is no one else has done what Jesus did. The resurrection is a big, huge, honking miracle. And so even if there are lying wonders in different areas, the resurrection of the dead trumps them. It's the big outclass miracle that outclasses everything else. And so a lot of miracle reports you hear from the ancient world, a lot of them had purely natural causes. They weren't miracles at all. Some of them were just legends. But when you look at events that we have actual evidence for, the resurrection stands alone. Nothing else is like this. It's not only a report of a resurrection, but we've got really good evidence that it actually happened. So that's the basic answer that I'd offer is when you actually study the evidence, not just claims, but when you look at the evidence, the resurrection stands alone.
Jamie, thank you so much. Got you in a little bit late there, but I tell you what I'd like to do is give you a book. It's called A Daily Defense, 365 Days Plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist. Lots of answers to lots of questions there from Jimmy Akin. So just hang on the phone and Edgar will get you the book if you'd like it. And that brings to the end the first hour. To me, it went quickly, but we got another one coming. So if you're on the line, stay on the line. If you haven't dialed yet, well, there may be a line or two open during the break. 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We're back, right? We are actually back because on the screen it says we'll be right back, but I believe we're back. So not that I like to point out other people's little foibles. I'm not that kind of person. I'm totally that kind of person. 888-318-7884 is the number. If you're watching us, we're back. It says we'll be right back, but we're back. And
don't they already know if we're back?
I think they probably do. Yes. That's called being a nudge. I'm just being a nudge. It's open. No, it's not. It's Ask Me Anything. Jimmy Akin is our guest. You can call and ask him anything. Anyone can call anywhere in the world who can dial into the United States, 888-318-7884, or from within the United States. You're welcome to call with whatever your question is. Jimmy, of course, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author of the book we just gave away, A Daily Defense, 365 Days Plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist. Also, the Bible is a Catholic book, also like a million other things. And he's the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
Yeah, how about that?
I used a million hyperbolically.
Oh, I knew.
Oh, you did? Okay. All right. I didn't want to put any pressure on you.
Not that that's far off, but
I know. You know what? I have no idea. I was looking through Wikipedia pages the other day, and I was like, I'm gonna see Jimmy Akin's Wikipedia page, and it's got a partial list of publications. I was like, that's the partial list. It was pretty impressive. All right, let's go to Cameron. Oh, right here in San Diego. Cameron, right here in San Diego, watching on YouTube. Glad you're here, Cameron. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. How are you doing?
Doing okay.
I'm glad to hear it. Okay, I have a bit of a long-winded question, but I'm going to try and be as concise as possible.
Thank you.
I recently watched a debate you did with Trent Horn versus Sam Nissan, something like that, and on the issue of justification.
And his partner, if Trent and I were both in it.
Yes, that's what I meant. I apologize. Yeah,
okay.
Excellent debate. Slightly under 3 hours. I recommend everyone go watch it. In the debate, you talk about the doctrine of purgatory, the necessity of a cleansing post-death, pre-heaven, and the necessity of shedding what I believe you called ties to experiential sin. And my question for
don't
you,
know that I use that language, but okay.
Sorry, not experiential. I can't remember what
disordered
the exact term
desires.
Was, but
disordered desires is what we shed in purgatory.
Yes. I apologize.
No problem.
But my question to you, the objection that your opponent brought up was that in shedding our earthly bodies, we also shed those attachments to sin. And thus, in heaven, when we are given new glorified bodies, we no longer have those attachments, thus getting rid of the necessity of purgatory. So my question to you, and the objection that you made to that statement was that he was basically calling our earthly bodies sinful by necessity. But my question to you is, if our spirits are washed clean when we are given the grace of Christ and salvation, what is and when we do shed our earthly bodies, what is the necessity of purification for our spirits prior to receiving our glorified body? Does that question make sense?
Well, let me have a stab at it, and we'll follow up and see if I've answered it for you. In regard to the first thing, my opponent in this debate, so like I handled half of the debate and Trent handled half of it. My opponent in this debate seemed rather confused regarding the answer to the question of, do you need to be purified by something after death? Because he at one point he did say something very much like what you just reported, but he also then seemed to say something about we're going to be purified by seeing Jesus. And so he seemed to be confusedly proposing two different explanations for why he thought we don't need purgatory. In regard to his first claim that we drop our disordered desires when we drop our bodies, that would root all of our disordered desires in our bodies. And there's a problem with that, in that damned people exist, and they drop their bodies too. So if damned people exist with their wills fixed on evil, that would seem to suggest that our disordered desires aren't simply rooted in our bodies. To borrow a parable from our Lord, whatever enters a man's physical body is not what makes him unclean, because it's going to pass through. And actually what Jesus says is then go into the latrine, although they don't typically translate it that way in English. What Jesus indicates does make a man unclean is what comes out of his heart. And here he's not thinking about the 2-pound hunk of meat that's beaten in your chest. He's thinking of your spiritual heart. And so even though we have metaphors about the flesh tempts us to do this or that, we can't confine our disordered desires to simply being a bodily phenomenon, because damned people have them too. Their wills, in fact, are fixed on evil. So we've got pretty good evidence that disordered desires are not exclusively a bodily phenomenon. The second thing that he gestured towards about we don't need purification because we're going to see Jesus also does not do away with the need for purification. It just means Jesus is the means of our purification. In fact, by articulating that as a possibility, he's essentially endorsing Pope Benedict's view of purgatory, because Pope Benedict understood the fire of purgatory to be the fiery transforming love of Christ. So purgatory is an encounter with Christ that, in Pope Benedict's words, it cannot be calculated in earthly time. So you can say, from an earthly perspective, it's instantaneous. Well, fine. Pope Benedict doesn't have a problem with that. So you still have something doing the purification. It's just the fact that we're having an encounter with Jesus. So those were the two components of his answer. Unfortunately, we didn't really get a chance to explore that in the debate, but that's what I would say about those two components. Now, in terms of your question, if our souls are washed clean, why do we need purification when we drop our bodies? Well, our souls, the question is, what are our souls washed clean from? They're clearly washed clean of all sin. That's the teaching of the Catholic Church, that everything that is properly sin is removed from our souls when we're justified. But we still have to deal with concupiscence, or disordered desires, as evidenced by the fact that after we become Christians, we still have disordered desires. And unless you're prepared to root those exclusively in the body, which goes contrary to the view that damned people exist, then you're going to need to say that they are an ongoing spiritual reality that will need to be dealt with before we have the full glory of heaven. Because in heaven, we're not going to be tempted by sin. We're not going to have disordered desires. And so something needs to happen to remove those desires. You could propose it's seeing Christ and having an encounter with him. You could propose it's something else, but something needs to deal with them.
Now, Jimmy said we'll go back to you, Cameron.
Excellent answer. However, I do have one objection to it.
Okay, what's the objection?
I agree. I agree with everything you've said. However, it does not follow that the fact that the souls of the damned have also shed their earthly bodies, because they also would have had. The conclusion, the objection that there exist the souls of the damned in hell who are still tempted by sin and have not shed those desires for sin, because their spirits would not have been washed clean. It's a combination of the two things. If you divide it into two parts, you have your body A, your spirit B, both have connections to the desire for sin. If, by the grace of God, here on our earthly life, the spirit is shed of that desire, well, it could still follow that the body can become the source of that. And once you shed that body, you're left with a pure spirit. I'm not sure I agree with that. For reference, I am Catholic. I believe all this stuff. I'm just anticipating this as an objection when I get to discussion with some of my Protestant kin. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does my objection make sense?
Well, so it seems to me that if I was going to argue against this position, I mean, you've articulated one possible way of trying to evade it. The difficulty is going to be claiming that even in this, because essentially what you've said is we have disordered desires because of our body, and we have disordered desires because of our soul in this life. And so if our souls are purified, the body is the only remaining source of disordered desires. Well, okay, number one, from a biblical perspective, that's going to be hard to sustain. But also from just a reason perspective, that's going to be hard to sustain. People make choices where they're not under any compelling bodily interest that are sinful. I mean, I could understand if someone would say gluttony or lust, has a root in bodily desires, but envy doesn't. So there are a bunch of sins that don't look simply physical. They look like they are part of our souls. And furthermore, you're presupposing a particular type of cleansing of the soul that would remove its disordered desires. And that's not something we find taught in the New Testament. So I'm anticipating, interacting with Protestants like you are, and they've got a sola scriptura perspective. And so if they proposed this to me, I'd say, so where's the scripture telling us this? Because this is not something that is typically part of Protestant doctrine. And if you believe in sola scriptura, you're going to need to be able to produce scriptures to back up this claim or set of claims. Furthermore, there are other Protestants, I would also point out to them, who agree with the Catholic point of view. C.S. Lewis, Jerry Walls, actually there's quite a number of different Protestants who support some understanding of the concept of purgatory for reasons that I've outlined. And I would say, well, show me why these guys are wrong. So there are a number of possible ways. I mean, yes, you can deny purgatory if you bite the bullet hard enough, but you're going to have to pay heavier theological prices. The other way to do it would be to say that, well, the souls of the damned actually are perfect and pure and holy souls. They're just damned. But they don't have their wills fixed on evil. And Christian theology has just been wrong about that. But then that creates its own problems. Like, if the souls of the damned are perfect and pure and holy, why isn't God treating them like they're perfect and pure and holy? Why didn't he forgive them for what they did if their wills are now turned towards God? That doesn't seem just, to punish someone whose will is turned towards God for all eternity based on something they did in the past and no longer endorse. So you can, if you're willing to deny enough, you can evade purgatory, but you're going to have to pay heavy theological prices for doing it.
Cameron, that certainly brings us to the break. As a matter of fact, we're a little past time to take the break, so I will say thank you for the call. It's Ask Me Anything. Jimmy Akin is our guest. We'll be right back with more after this.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
EWTN is everywhere. EWTN radio programming is provided free of charge to over 500 domestic and international AM and FM radio stations. It's a great teaching tool for Catholics and non-Catholics alike. For a complete list of EWTN AM and FM stations across America, visit EWTNradio.net. At the bottom of the page, click Affiliates. EWTN is the global Catholic network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host, Jimmy Akin, our guest, covering the world today on Catholic Answers Live, which is kind of fun. Diaz is in India watching on YouTube. Well, that's a rarity for us as well, Diaz, to get a call from India. Thank you for calling.
Thank you, sir, for attending my call.
We're so happy to have you. Go ahead with your question.
Namaste, Diaz.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Namaste, Diaz.
Oh, thank you so much. Namaste, sir. Namaste. Actually, I'm a Catholic person, so we don't say namaste in our community. We say Jai Yeshu in Hindi. It means that praise to be Jesus in English.
Oh, beautiful.
Jai Yesu Diaz.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, Jeremy. And thank you so much, sir. Actually, sir, I'm having a question. And this question has been raised by Muslim people to me because many times when I talk with other other faith people, then they raise some question. And this is a question that is bothering me from a very long time. And
what's the question?
I'm having no answer for this. Yes, sir, I'm going to ask. Sir, it is John's Gospel. Chapter number 7 from verse number 53 till John's Gospel chapter 8 till verse number, I think it is till 11, the adulterous woman account. So this particular verse, even the some of the footnote, it's been saying that this is a particular passage is not found in the original Johannine writing, and the longer reading of Mark also. So my question is this, that always Muslim people, they say that Bible is corrupt, Bible is changed, and it is being manipulated. Later on, a lot of verses has been added to it, a lot of verses been removed to it. And one thing they show for this, like our Father prayer from Matthew's Gospel, because in Matthew's Gospel, if we go to old, like traditional text, then like the King James reading or Douay Henson, it is having a doxology, and I think you know what I'm talking about. But if we are going to read our new Bibles in these days, then the doxology is not there. Even 1 John 5:7, that the Father, the Word, and the Holy Spirit, that these three are one. That is also in the King James, but not
Diaz,
in our
you're putting a whole bunch
Bible.
of Diaz. Hang on just a second. You're putting a whole bunch of different issues on the table, and there's no way I'm going to be able to address all of them individually. Can you sum this up into an overall question for me?
I just want to let you. Yes, sir. I just want to present my case that this is the type of question I am having, and now you address.
Okay. Well, so let's deal with the Christian half of this, and then let's deal with the Muslim half of this. So God promised that he would give his word to his people, and he did, and he divinely inspired some of them to write it down. But he didn't promise that in copying the scriptures later, nobody would ever make a mistake. And so scribes did make mistakes as they copied things down. There are a variety of causes for that, which have been studied by scholars, and not just Christian scholars, but other scholars too. And the good news is, because the Bible, not the Quran, is the most successful book in world history, we have more manuscripts of the Bible than any other book in world history. And we're able, and that's a good thing, because we can use those different manuscripts to correct each other. So based on rules, this is a science it's sometimes called lower criticism. It's also sometimes called textual criticism, but scholars have worked out rules to try to figure out which reading was the original. Now, you cited there are only two notable passages that are of any length in the New Testament that look like they may not have been original. You named the account of the woman caught in adultery in John and the longer ending of Mark, and those are the only two. You then proceeded to name a couple of shorter passages that just amount to a verse each. You named the doxology, "For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory," that got attached to Matthew's prayer, because of Matthew's version of the Lord's Prayer, because the doxology had been used in the liturgy, and people thought, oh, well, maybe why isn't that here? Because I hear it in the liturgy, and they added it in, not realizing it was a piece of the liturgy rather than part of the original text. And then you also mentioned the Ioannine comma about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit being one. But those are like the most famous examples, and that's kind of pretty much all there is. There are lots of little bitty things that don't affect the meaning of passages, like you just change the word order, and word order doesn't mean the same thing in Greek that it does in English. I don't know about Hindi, but Greek has very flexible word order because it uses inflections for nouns and adjectives that are case-based, and so you don't have to put the words in the same order to convey the same meaning the same way you do in English. So there's lots of little variations that don't affect the meaning at all. And so we're actually in a very good position to know what the original readings of the New Testament were. There's debate about a few passages, but it really doesn't affect any of Christian doctrine. Now, what about the Muslim side? Well, the Quran, like the Bible, was also invented before the printing press. And so consequently, the Quran also had to be hand copied prior to the invention of the printing press. And that means scribes made mistakes in copying the Quran too. And we can show that by comparing different versions of the Quran to each other, particularly ancient manuscripts. And there's evidence that at a certain point, Muslims collected up a bunch of the early manuscripts that had diverged so much that they then burned them. They got rid of the evidence to preserve only one version of the Quran, which then itself went and was subject to scribal mistakes later on, because every book in the ancient world is subject to scribal mistakes. The good thing about Christianity is we didn't burn the evidence. We kept it, and so we're able to reconstruct the original reading of the New Testament far better than Muslims are able to reconstruct the original reading of the Quran. Frankly, they're in denial about this problem, but it remains the case.
Diaz, I'm going to leave it there. I'm, again, delighted that you took the time to call us from India. Thank you very much. I hope we'll get to speak again. But from India, we go to central New Jersey. Donald, listening on domestic media. Glad you're here, Donald. Hang on a quick sec while I get the right button here. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Cy. Hi, Jimmy.
Hi there. It says Central Jersey. I assume that's the island of Jersey over in England.
Donald, are you in Jersey in England or in New Jersey in the United States?
New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
I think
now we got it right. Okay.
Go ahead, Donald.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to say that Pope Francis is one of the most loving, compassionate men I've ever seen. But at the same time, I was wondering, I have a few things about him that I consider he may be a heretic. Is it too controversial?
No.
Yeah, because he's not a heretic, but go ahead and I'll try to help you out.
Okay. It started off with the Pachamama, and then faith and morals. He blesses same-sex unions. That seems immoral to me. And he should have schismed against the German church, but instead he turned right around and almost is doing the same thing right now in a case of marriages or unions.
Well, hang on, Donald. There's not a lot of time, Jimmy. Do you want to have a full list, or you want to take those three, or how would you like?
Well, I think I probably better limit the number of things, because if otherwise I simply won't have time to respond. We're about to hit the break, Donald. So I can respond to the Pachamama challenge, the blessing same-sex unions, and what was the third?
Let's see, faith and morals, because that's same-sex unions. I'm talking about Brazil Synod too. That's the last one.
Oh, Germany's synodal way. That was the third. Okay, so I'll address those three things when we come back from the other side of the break, and I'll also give you a general principle that you can employ to deal with other situations that you may find troubling as well.
Donald, very grateful for the call. Just hang on. We're going to get to it. We're going to take a break that'll be very quick. All the lines are full. I'll keep giving out the phone number, but all the lines are full, and we are grateful for that. I don't mean to have a tone in my voice about it. We are very grateful for it. As we head into the break, I'll invite you again. Please check out CatholicAnswersConference.com for all the information about our big conference coming up September 26th through 29th right here in sunny San Diego. The theme of the conference, we can't hold a Congress. We don't have that kind of authority. But the theme of the conference, learn from me the parables, sermons, and conversations of Jesus Christ. It's going to be a great time. Check it out at CatholicAnswersConference.com. When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers monthly giving club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
As we read the Gospels, every Christian faces the question again and again, what does Jesus mean? Getting the answer right is critical to both growth in holiness and fruitful evangelization. Want to know Jesus better so you can introduce him to your friends? Then it's time to get serious about understanding his words. Why not join Catholic Answers for our 10th annual Apologetics Conference? Learn from me the parables, sermons, and conversations of Jesus Christ. September 26th through 29th, right here in sunny San Diego. Learn from our guests, Dr. Scott Hahn and Kimberly Hahn, Dr. Ray Garendi, Father Sebastian Walsh, Billy Junker, Father Paul Check, and, of course, all of your favorite Catholic Answers apologists. It'll be 4 days of fun, faith, fellowship, and a live radio show. Seats are still available, but going fast to visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 1-888-291-8000 today. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's Ask Me Anything. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Donald in New Jersey had a bit of an extended list, but we got it down to three of questions about Pope Francis as the Pope. Is he a heretic? Jimmy, you've got the three items that we've got to.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So first, here's the general principle. We need to understand what heresy is. Heresy is the post-baptismal obstinate doubt or denial of a truth that must be believed with divine and Catholic faith. Now, that's kind of hard to process, so I'll put it in other terms that are going to be a little simpler. What a heresy is after someone's baptized, they refuse to believe something that is a dogma. And so that's the essence of heresy. Someone who's baptized refuses to believe a dogma. And we talked about what a dogma is earlier in this episode. A dogma is an infallible teaching where the church has infallibly defined that something is part of divine revelation. Okay. So, in other words, a heresy is for a baptized person to refuse to believe something that the church has infallibly defined to be part of divine revelation. So if you're going to accuse someone of heresy, much less accusing the Pope of it, you're going to need some pretty good evidence that he's done that. So, and another principle of law is you in matters like this, you have to give a favorable reading whenever possible. And that's also dictated by the fact that the Pope is our spiritual father. And so we need to give a favorable reading to his actions whenever we can. So you named three things, Pachamama, blessing same-sex unions, and the synodal way in Germany. Okay, so the Pachamama thing right off the bat is problematic because even though you had lots of people saying this is an idol, that's not at all clear, and because this is not a traditional figure that you find in South America. It's this statuette, or actually it's made out of wood, but it's a carving of a pregnant woman, and she represents Mother Earth. Okay, so you can have a personification of Mother Earth without it being an idol. And this is not an established image. They made this up for the Amazonian Synod. So given that, when you see the Pope, having an Amazonian Synod and this statuette is involved, what our normal basic interpretation should be is, this is a statuette they came up with for the Synod. It personifies Mother Earth, and that's as far as it goes. That's the charitable reading here. It is a non-charitable reading to go beyond that and propose this is an idol and the Pope is worshiping it, because he wasn't doing that. He didn't worship this thing. It's just a symbol of Mother Earth. So we don't have evidence here of him committing a heresy. What about blessing same-sex unions? Well, I understand the confusion on this because of the way the press handled it, but Pope Francis has repeatedly confirmed, including in his recent interview with 60 Minutes, because the interviewer, O'Donnell was her name, I believe, said, you've now allowed the blessing of same-sex unions, and he immediately leapt in with, no, I have not. I've allowed the blessing of two individuals, but not their union. And he's right that now you may think this is a good idea or a bad idea. Personally, I would have phrased the document differently or not done it at all because of the confusion it was going to generate. But blessing people who are sinners or who are struggling with sin and trying to live in God's grace, that's legitimate, because we're all sinners and some of us are trying to live in keeping with God's grace. So blessing two individuals is not a heresy, no matter what they're doing, and as a way of encouraging them to live by God's grace in conformity with his law. Now, I think the document, Fiducia Supplicans, was very badly phrased, and I think it blew up in their faces as one could predict it would. So I think it was a bad idea, and I think the document itself, if you wanted to do something along these lines, you need to build in very firm statements of clarity about what this does not mean, and they didn't do that. So, I think there's a lot of ground for criticism here, but denying something the church is infallibly defined to be divinely revealed, that's not what's happening in this situation. So it's not a heresy. You can argue it's a bad idea, but bad idea does not equal heresy. Then there's the German synodal way. And Donald suggested that he should be drawn harder lines with the synodal way. Well, the problem with doing that is that could actually bring on a schism. And so what the Pope has been doing has been trying to avoid a schism. He's been laying down various lines with the Germans, and they keep crossing them. Well, if they keep crossing him, even when he's being nice about it, you could imagine if he suddenly became Mr. Stern Authoritarian, they would march right over those lines, or at least one could argue that's what they would do. And so one can debate about, is his approach to the German synodal way the optimal approach? Does it need to be tweaked in some way? Does he need to be more confrontational? Well, maybe, but he's not denying something that has been infallibly defined to be divinely revealed. What he's trying to do is avoid a schism. And that's a matter, how you avoid a schism is a matter of prudential judgment. Sometimes you're hard, sometimes you're soft, sometimes you're a combination of both. And he's actually been pursuing a combination of both strategy. So I think one can question if that's the right strategy, but he's simply not doing anything heretical. He's not denying something that the church has infallibly defined to be divinely revealed. So he's not a heretic.
Donald, thank you. Thanks very much for the call, for the question. I hope that answer was helpful to you. As we've been saying, every line continues full, so on we go for more calls. Richard is in New York City. New York City, listening on the Alexa. Richard, go ahead with your question.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I've struggled with the scripture for many years, Romans 10:9, which reads, "If you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." I've always struggled with the part of you believe in your heart, especially understanding that faith is a gift, and I guess believing in your heart would be a gift too. It would be a grace. And I always wonder, do I believe in my heart, especially when my heart is not as tender as I would like for it to be because of hurts in the past and so forth.
Okay.
And I walk around wondering, do I believe in my heart? And it just eats away at me. Like, I don't know if I believe in my heart. I want to believe, but I don't know.
Okay. So I understand this situation because people can get into kind of a thought trap where they're questioning themselves over and over about, do I really believe, or things like that. And they feel like they have to have a certain level of confidence in order to really believe. And asking that question process as part of the thought trap undermines their confidence. And really, confidence is a feeling. It's not a belief. You can feel great confidence in the Christian faith, or you can feel little confidence in the Christian faith, because confidence is an emotion, and emotions are not beliefs. All you really need to do to establish whether you believe in your heart is say, do you accept that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? Do you accept that he rose from the dead? Regardless of the level of confidence you feel about that, if you accept the New Testament message about Jesus and say, I may not understand it, I may not feel confident, but I accept it, then you believe in your heart. And that's all you need to do is ask yourself that question. And then you should not get scrupulous about it and keep asking, but what level of confidence do I feel? That's a separate question. And you'll feel less confidence if you keep asking it than if you just say, well, I've accepted it. That's what I need to do. And I'm not going to worry about it beyond that. That's actually what will encourage you to have more confidence, is ceasing to question how much confidence do you have.
Does that help you, Richard?
A lot. Yeah, that helps. I mean, I do believe that Jesus is Lord. I do believe he's the Son of God.
Mm-hmm.
I read my scriptures, but this always the scripture is just like, So I thought I called today. Thank you for answering that question.
No problem. Glad you called.
Beautiful, Richard. You sound relieved. Hey, if you'd like a book, I'd like to send you a book called Secrets from Heaven, Hidden Treasures of Faith and the Parables and Conversations of Jesus by our good friend, Father Sebastian Walsh. If you'd like a copy of that book, all you got to do is wait on the line and give an address to Edgar when he picks up the line. I'm going to go to a quick break. Then we will be back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment. Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
One of the biggest mistakes a Christian can make is to try to do good without God's help. St. Therese said, when we trust only ourselves and not God, our soul becomes incapable of virtue. Her remedy? Works of charity. And the greatest work of charity is to share the gospel. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we encourage you to share the gospel with someone who doesn't know Jesus. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
At EWTN Radio, your family. And because you're a part of our family, we value your opinions on what you hear on EWTN. You can call our listener comment line 24/7 at 205-795-5773. We value your comments, your questions, and any suggestions you may have to make EWTN Radio even better. 205-795-5773. And thank you for listening to EWTN Radio.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Every single line full for 2 straight hours. Wow, wonder who's popular around here. It would seem to be Mr. Akin.
People just want to call in and have you process their questions.
That's it. They're like, whoa, man, I can't wait to have Cy hand me off to Jimmy. All right, let's go to Birmingham, Alabama. Amber is in Birmingham watching on YouTube, and I think you've been waiting a long time, Amber, and I apologize for that, but thank you for waiting. No, Amber? Did I push the wrong button? Maybe Amber didn't wait.
Line 2.
All right, it's line 2. All right, I'll tell you what, Amber, if you hear this in a minute, just hang on. I'm coming back to you. I'm not leaving you. I just can't hear you at the moment. Hunter's in Georgia watching on YouTube. How about you, Hunter? Are you there with us?
Yes, sir.
Oh, great. You scared me. That pause scared me, Hunter. Yeah, I can hear you fine. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for taking my call, Jimmy. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes. What's your question, Hunter?
Okay. So a while back, I watched this documentary called Secrets of Christianity, and it's by a Israeli journalist called named Simcha Jacobovici. I may be butchering that.
Oh, sure.
And so there's
I know who you mean.
Okay. So there's an episode they did about the sea voyage to the land of the Gadarenes, and and they try to prove that the land of the Gadarenes is in Spain rather than in the Sea of Galilee. And then during the episode, there was a part where a biblical scholar by the name of James Tabor,
I know him too.
He says that that one of the things that's often forgotten about the job of the Messiah is that he's got to bring in all 12 tribes of Israel back into the land of Israel, and that basically Jesus didn't fulfill that because the Gadarenes were supposed to be the lost tribe of Gad, and he didn't bring them back during his first coming. So I guess my question is how did Jesus fulfill the prophecy, the messianic prophecy about bringing in all 12 lost tribes of Israel back into the land of Israel?
Okay, so the first thing to know is James Tabor is a very eccentric individual. He has a lot of views on various matters that basically there's no other support for in the scholarly community. He's an eccentric. That doesn't mean he's always wrong, but it does mean whenever you hear him say something, you really want to look at it to say, how good is the evidence here? When we're talking about the prophecy that the tribes would be reunited, there's actually a debate in the Jewish community about that prophecy. It seems pretty evenly split there, but you find in Talmudic times the rabbis debating about that, and does this prophecy still apply, or has it been canceled? Because when the 10 lost tribes left, they lost their Jewish identities. I mean, when they were taken into captivity, they eventually lost their Jewish faith, they lost their Jewish identities, they got integrated with other peoples. And so, and they disobeyed God. And so for those tribes, are they going to be brought back? Well, there's a lot of Jewish scholars who would say, no, they're not. They invalidated the promise by abandoning God. And so that's one possible solution here is, and I should say James Tabor's idea about Gad being in Spain, and that's the Gadarenes, that's all just crazy. The Gadarenes, as the Gospels indicate, were on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, not over in Spain. And we also know where the 10 lost tribes went, and they didn't go to Spain. But one solution is the prophecy it became invalid. And so Jesus didn't need to fulfill it because it became invalid. Another solution is, and this is actually one that there's support for in some of the church fathers, is Jesus did reunite the tribes after his first coming because they blended in with these other people in Mesopotamia. And Mesopotamia became Christian. So they were spiritually reunited with his other people, and thus all the different tribes were reunited, because there are Jewish Christians and there are Israeli Christians. Even if they lost their identity, their descendants still became part of Christianity. And so he may have fulfilled the prophecy that way. And then a third possibility is he hadn't gotten around to it yet, but he'll do it at the second coming, just like there are other prophecies about bringing world peace and stuff that haven't yet been fulfilled, but will be fulfilled in a greater way at the second coming. And maybe this is just one of those prophecies too.
Hunter, thanks. I hope that was helpful to you. As I've been saying, lots of folks on the line, so on we go. And we're going to go back and talk to Amber in Birmingham, Alabama, watching on YouTube. Amber, sorry we had trouble connecting a moment ago, but I'm glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, y'all. That's totally my fault. I apologize. I have been so inspired by apologists that I would love to become one myself one day. And I was wondering if there's any requirements really for taking on that kind of role, like needing a master's in theology or something like that.
No, everyone can do apologetics on whatever scale is appropriate for them. You don't need any professional qualifications. There aren't master's programs in apologetics, not in the Catholic world anyway. I don't have academic qualifications beyond, I have a philosophy degree, and that helps with apologetics. So there are things you can study to help, and philosophy is one of those things. But fundamentally, if you put in the work to get the knowledge, that's all you need to do. Most of what I've learned about apologetics is stuff I self-studied, and I also learned on the job, because my philosophy degree prepared me for certain questions like, does God exist? But then when and also as I became a Catholic, I had to convince myself of the truth of Catholic theology and see that it was, better biblically than the Protestant theology I already had. And so that kind of gave me a background in Catholic apologetics. But then when I started working as an apologist, people ask all kinds of questions that are not properly apologetics, like this one, which is about how you become an apologist instead of being an apologetic question. Or we did a show a month or two ago where I noted for each question what category it technically went in. And they were questions about history and science and the Bible and liturgy and canon law and all these different topics, none of which were apologetics. But they were questions people had, and I wanted to help them out, and so I did. But a lot of that learning was self-study and stuff I learned on the job by doing it, which is fundamentally how you get the skills. You get apologetic skills by doing apologetics. You could do it in person, talking to people. You could do it on social media. You could do it on YouTube. But if you're interested in being an apologist, there are some books you can read that would help. There are some, academic programs you could take, I would recommend the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics for online apologetic instruction. But there are a variety of different things, but fundamentally it comes down to doing the work and getting experience, both in terms of self-study and in terms of actually applying the skills and helping figure out how to help people with the issues they're dealing with.
Okay, Amber?
Thank you.
I'll tell you what, Amber, I don't know if you've got any of Jimmy's books, but I'd love to send you a daily defense. I think you would enjoy that.
I was going to suggest that one.
If you've already got a daily defense, just tell Edgar you'd like another one of Jimmy's books, and he'll help you pick out a different one. But a daily defense, 365 days, +1 to becoming a better apologist, is yours if you'd like it. Just give Edgar an address to send it to. I'm going to go to Oklahoma now. Alicia is in Oklahoma. Alicia, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for taking my call. I was calling because a couple friend of ours, they have asked us to be on their will to take their 2 children in the event that hopefully never happens, that both of them pass away. We would take them in and have them be our children. But they're not Catholic, and they have requested that we do not baptize them. I've talked to my husband about this, and I think we're both in agreement that at the age of reason and above, if they were to come into our home and they told us they wanted to be baptized, then we would have them baptized, because I'm not going to deny that to them.
Good.
Prior to the age of reason, though, I don't know if it's like my husband's on the side that we should respect their wishes. I'm more leaning towards I want to do what is best for the children in terms of their soul. In any of those events, like before the age of reason or after the age of reason, do we tell them that no, I'm sorry, we're going to baptize your kids, or can we honor their request?
Well, you can honor their request. Now, I agree. After the age of reason, it's the children's decision. And so they're no longer infants at that point, canonically speaking, and they have the right to make the decision themselves. So that's not the issue. The issue would be before they hit the age of reason, would you deviate from the parents' wishes? And I would say that's a debatable question. I think people can have different opinions on that. And if you and your husband, I would also say that if you and your husband conclude that you can agree to this, and the, God forbid, rare circumstance that this would actually happen, because it's hard to find people to take your kids, and they obviously think a lot of y'all if they're asking you to do this, and it's very unlikely that both of the parents would die. So this is probably a moot situation anyway. And the kids are going to be non-infants. I mean, the church customarily recognizes the age of reason as like 7 years old. So there's only a limited window of time. It'd be even more unlikely for both of the parents to die in that window. So this is probably a moot situation. And I probably wouldn't have an issue agreeing to it, at least provisionally. Now, if, God forbid, this actually happened, then I'd probably reevaluate and say, should we still continue with this understanding, or now that we actually are in charge of the children's good, maybe we need to take another look at this, and you might come to a different conclusion. But I think given the unlikelihood of this, and the difficulty of finding someone to take your kids in the event of a tragedy like this, I would not insist that you make the decision now to definitely baptize them and tell them about it, because it is a situation where one could have different conclusions that one comes to, and trying to sort it all out at an advanced stage like this is something that I don't know that I would do. If you want, you could kind of I'm not going to say split the baby down the middle like Solomon did, but you could say, we understand your wishes and we will do our best to honor them, and leave it at that.
What do you think?
That's not a promise. That's not a promise that you're going to honor them, but we're going to do our best to honor them and so forth.
Well, because I think that what they're wanting is a definitive, like an actual answer, either yes or no. And so that's where we're kind of having the hard time with it. So I don't want to I think my husband would feel, and I feel a little odd too, telling them, no, we won't baptize your kids before the age of reason. And then, the unfortunate circumstance happens and then go ahead and baptize them. But I wasn't sure anyways, if they're not like babies, if they've never been raised up in a faith, like they might know faith from us, but their parents aren't religious, like if it would be appropriate to baptize them anyways, because they wouldn't really know anything of Christianity.
In the rule is, in danger of death, children are to be baptized even against the will of the parents. But otherwise, there is a natural law right of the parents to make determinations, and so you want to try to honor their wishes apart from like danger of death situations.
Alicia, thank you so much for waiting and for bringing the question. I hope that was helpful to you. It sounded like it was, but you can always call back on another day if there's more follow-up that you'd like. Jimmy Akin has been our guest. Tomorrow morning, the second part of the Unicorns episodes airs. The saga of the Unicorns. Thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
That'll do it for us. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.